Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to be walking you through how to fight the brand new GLYKHAN boss from Act 8.4. Now, for the majority of players, this is going to be by far the most challenging boss in Act 8. So whether you're here because you just got your face kicked in and you're looking for help, or you are looking for an idea of what to expect before heading into 8.4, you have come to the right place because I'm going to break it all down for you right now. One quick disclaimer before I get into the guide: all of the gameplay that you are about to see was recorded on the GLYKHAN beta that the CCP was given access to several months ago. Now, there have been several changes made to the fight since then, but we were not given a second round of testing, so if you see something in the gameplay that doesn't exactly match what I'm saying, assume that what I'm saying is accurate. If there are any further changes to the fight after this video goes live, I will leave them in a pinned comment below. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's begin with a few very important things that you need to know before you jump into the fight. The very first thing that you need to know about GLYKHAN is that all of his abilities will bypass your champion's immunities. Now, for the moment, this really only is going to affect champions who are immune to power drain. However, if in the future Kabam decides to introduce a champ who is immune to root, that is going to apply here as well. Secondly, all of GLYKHAN's abilities are immune to ability accuracy modification. This has become pretty standard in boss fights nowadays and really should be no surprise to you. Third, activating any sort of indestructible or immortality effect will result in GLYKHAN immediately getting his special 3 and killing you with it. So this doesn't just stop Herc, it is also going to stop champions like Titania and Hulkling as well, and it's also going to discourage you from bringing the Heimdall synergy, so do keep that in mind when selecting your team. The fourth thing you need to know is a mechanic called Wounds of Defiance. So these are passive damage over time effects that deal 3.5% of your maximum health over 2 seconds. So each hit in both GLYKHAN Special 1 and Special 2 will inflict a Wound of Defiance on you, and this is very, very important. They can be inflicted through your block. So learning how to fully dex both of his special attacks is probably the most important and challenging aspect of this fight for many players. In a later phase, you're going to be rooted during his special attacks, and it becomes even more critical that you learn how to do these dexes, and we'll cover how to do that in a bit more detail later. So similarly to all the other Act 8 bosses, GLYKHAN also has a safeguard mechanic, and it's called Corrupted Armor. So his armor prevents all damage except from combos that result in punishing his heavy or his special attacks, and you can use a striker to extend these damaging combos. So unlike Sarastes, a relic is not really required for this fight, but it will make it a lot easier and a little bit faster as well, so I definitely do recommend it. Equipping a relic will also allow you to avoid an especially punishing part of the fight. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And finally, your attack and crit damage ratings will be locked at the start of the fight and cannot be increased via your champion's abilities. So this means that any champion that relies on fury or cruelty effects or anything similar to that will be unable to increase their damage output naturally throughout the fight. So your buff-reliant cosmic champs like Gamora or Black Bolt are going to be hurt here, but so will champs that increase their attack rating in other ways like Strife or Iron Man. So this is really designed to kind of like level the playing field here and make sure that some attackers are not way too strong for the fight. The good news, though, is that any hits on GLYKHAN that would deal damage and are part of those damaging combos that I mentioned a minute ago will be guaranteed critical hits and will also deal a flat amount of bonus damage, and there will be a way for attackers to increase their overall damage output throughout the fight. We'll talk about that in just a second. Alright, let's talk about the main gameplay loop in this fight, and it's called Divine Punishments. So there are 5 different types of punishments. I'll put them up here on the screen for you, and each of them is activated when you perform a specific action throughout the fight. So there's a punishment for stunning him, for hitting into his block with your first light attack, for dealing damage with a striker, for intercepting him twice in a row, and finally for dealing damage with a special attack. So do note that the ones that specify deal damage require you to use them as part of a combo that occurs after punishing his heavy or special attack. So for example, if you try and special intercept him, that special attack is not going to actually deal damage and will not trigger one of the divine punishments. Triggering any punishment will give you a permanent 25% prowess passive, and unlike normal prowess, these will last for the entirety of the current phase and will not expire after your next special attack. So the punishments stack up to 3 each, and if you trigger 12 total punishments, all of them will be reset to 0 and you will be granted 3 additional bonus stacks of prowess. If you fully dex any of his special attacks, 1 random punishment is removed, and if you die, 3 random punishments will be removed. So the main goal of this fight is just to continuously build up prowess by triggering these punishments. You're dexing the specials to remove punishments. That allows you to re-trigger them, get 12 total active, that gives you the bonus prowess, and then you're just chunking GLYKHAN down with your special attacks. So punishments are also going to increase your spirit gain rate. That's going to give you more frequent access to your striker, which is going to allow you to extend those damaging combos more often. Now, of course, it's not as easy as it sounds if that sounds easy to you, and there are a few wrinkles that we need to talk about as well. So the first is that if you trigger a punishment that is already at the maximum stacks of 3, your next hit will be evaded and punished by GLYKHAN, and this counterattack is unavoidable, and you're going to take a pretty decent chunk of damage if he lands a full combo afterward. The other wrinkle is that each punishment has an associated side effect, and I'll put those up on the screen here as well. So for example, for each punishment of Stupor on GLYKHAN, he will inflict a wound of defiance on you if you hit into him while he's stunned. So in general, the way you want to approach this one is that at the start of the fight, parry 3 times to trigger the max stacks of 3 for this punishment, and then get your openings by either baiting a heavy attack or punishing a special attack. For Banality, if you hit into his block with anything other than your first medium or your first light, again he will inflict a wound of defiance on you for each punishment of Banality. So just remember, don't ever hit into his block more than twice. For the punishment of Tedium, using a striker is going to inflict a spirit drain passive on you. You can mostly mitigate this one because you're going to have increased spirit gain rate for each punishment on you. Now, the frustration one is, in my opinion, the absolute worst one. So for each punishment of frustration, the ability accuracy of your stuns and your striker stun will be reduced by 30%. Having your striker stun fail is extremely annoying, and it is therefore my recommendation that you avoid intercepting completely in this fight, because accidentally triggering this punishment really sucks. You won't know if your striker stun is going to fail until you actually use your striker, and by then it's too late and GLYKHAN is going to punish you and you really won't be able to do anything about it. And then finally here we have Obliqueness, which inflicts a power drain passive after a special attack, and remember, power drain immune champs will actually not be immune to this. But if you're using your special attacks at every opportunity, this one really shouldn't be much of an issue for you. Alright, let's talk about which champs are going to be best suited for this fight. Now, unlike previous bosses, GLYKHAN is a superior class champ, which means everybody has class disadvantage against him. However, mutants in particular are going to do very well here, especially those mutants that are heavily reliant on prowess and have reliable access to it. So their prowess is going to stack with the prowess that you're going to be getting via the punishments, and it's going to significantly increase your overall damage output. So we're talking champs like Storm, Havoc, Toad, Sauron, Bishop, Sunspot, all going to do very well here. Nightcrawler should also put in some good work now that he's buffed, although we didn't get to test the fight with the buffed version of him. Similarly, Dust is a newer champion that we weren't able to test with, but she has access to quite a bit of prowess as well. Now, another good option that you might consider is Proxima Midnight, who hasn't been useful for anything maybe ever, but she has some very potent prowess buffs of her own, and she should be able to dish out a large amount of damage. The only thing you got to worry about with her, though, is that she has a guaranteed stun on her special 2, and if you use that when you're already at the max stacks of 3 for the punishment of Stupor, then you're going to trigger wounds of defiance on you. Now, your next best options are going to be champs that have easy access to either regen, or a lot of armor, or very high block proficiency. So King Groot, Kingpin, Cap Infinity War, Valkyrie, Red Skull, Dr. Doom are all going to do very well here. There is a lot of chip damage in this fight, and any champ that is going to help you stay alive longer is going to be very valuable. As for what kind of champion to avoid, in general you should stay away from champs that cannot crit, any champ that relies heavily on damage over time effects, any champ that relies on a parry heavy playstyle, and champs that have very rigid rotations. Flexibility and simplicity are going to be key here. Finally, with 7 stars becoming much more common these days, let's talk briefly about stat focus. So guaranteed crits and prowess are available to you during the fight, which means using crit damage or crit rate or special damage as your stat focus is really not going to do anything for you. Instead, I would recommend that you focus on survivability and go with either armor or block proficiency. Okay, I know that was a lot of information to cover, and I hope you're still with me. Before we get into the fight breakdown, I want to make a few general notes about the phases. There are 3 total phases, each of them is pretty similar. Each phase lasts for the entirety of GLYKHAN's health bar, and at the conclusion of each phase, a small cutscene is going to play where he's going to break and reform his armor, and then his health bar will be restored back to 100%. It looks very similar to how Superior Kang works, if you remember that fight. And then finally, every time you reset the phase, all of your prowess effects and your punishments will be reset as well, so that means that you'll start each phase with a clean slate. Alright, let's go ahead and jump right into the fight itself and cover everything phase by phase. Okay, at the start of the fight you'll be in phase 1, and in this phase you want to do the punishments in the order they appear on the HUD. So that would be stun first, hit into block, use your striker, and then use your special. So what you're seeing me do here at the start of the fight is try to get 6 easy punishments out of the way by parrying and hitting his block 3 times each. Notice that I'm skipping the intercept punishment, and I would recommend you do the same for now. Reducing the ability accuracy of your parry stuns and your striker stun is going to seriously disrupt your ability to trigger the other punishments. GLYKHAN's special attacks will cost 5% less power for each punishment in this phase. His combat power rate is also going to be reduced by 25% total, so it is going to take more hits to get him to those specials. Stick to baiting GLYKHAN's special 1 and use this phase to get the timing of all of the dexes down. Remember that any hit or blocked hit from it is going to inflict a wound of defiance on you, and each wound is going to deal 3.5% of your maximum health and damage. Now the reason you want to stick to baiting special 1s here is because if you fully dex a special attack, 1 random punishment will be removed, and this allows you to re-trigger it to gain additional prowess. But if you're pushing him to the special 2, you're then baiting fewer specials, and that is fewer opportunities to gain more prowess. Keep an eye on GLYKHAN's side of the screen to see what punishments you have available to you, and remember, don't use a striker or a special attack if he's already at max stacks for those punishments. Now, if you manage to build up a total of 12 punishments, all of them will be removed and you'll gain some bonus prowess, but this is absolutely not required and truly is just a bonus. You'll be getting more than enough prowess from just fully dexing those special attacks. Remember also that when you max out the punishment of banality, you cannot hit into his block with more than just your first medium, so do your best to try and create some space for yourself whenever he backs up. Similarly, if you're using a champ like Storm or Overseer or Proxima who has a stun on one of their special attacks, you do need to be mindful not to use that special if your punishment of Stupor is maxed out. Now the duration of this phase is largely dependent on your champion's special attack damage. You'll be doing a little bit here and there with basic attacks, but the prowess is really how you're going to take large chunks off of him. Keep looping through, removing punishments and adding additional punishments, gain that prowess, and this phase will end when you've completely drained his health bar for the first time. After a quick cutscene in which GLYKHAN will break and reform his armor, phase 2 will begin. Now in this phase, GLYKHAN won't use a special attack until he's at 2 bars of power, so take advantage of this by building up your punishments and your prowess in the same way you did at the start of phase 1. Now when he has 2 bars of power, GLYKHAN is going to randomly use either his special 1 or his special 2. If he decides to use his special 1, he's going to gain an unstoppable passive, and if he decides to use his special 2, he's going to gain an unblockable passive. Both of these effects will last for 16 seconds after the special attack animation ends, and you can reduce the duration by 4 seconds for each hit that you dexed. So a full dex of either special is going to cause these effects to expire immediately, which is what you want to aim for. Each time he uses a special attack, he will rapidly build his power back up to 2 bars. Now, you might be asking yourself, Sim, how on earth am I supposed to know which special he's going to use so that I know which dexes I need to do? Well, you really don't, and that's kind of the point. However, you will get a few frames of warning if you train yourself to look for the color of the effect that triggers. So yellow means unstoppable, and that means he's throwing his special 1, and purple is unblockable, and that means he's throwing his special 2. So while you're baiting a special, try to keep an eye on his side of the screen, and as soon as you spot the color of the effect, you'll know which special he's throwing and then which dex you need to do. So this might be the first time you're really seeing the special 2 if you've been baiting the special 1 the whole time. The trickiest part of this one is how slowly he throws the axe at the end of it, so be very careful not to get hit by it. His recovery time on the special 2 is very generous, so even if you are all the way at the other end of the screen when you dodge the axe, you'll still be able to dash in and punish him. Another thing to note in this phase is that when he's at 2 bars of power, GLYKHAN's combat power rate remains the same. It's not like Power Focus 2 where it takes a bazillion hits to push him into the red. So try to be mindful of this, shorten your combos if necessary if you want to throw a special attack when he's above 2 bars. From here, keep activating your punishments in the same way and the same order that you did in Phase 1. If you are nailing full special dexes, you'll also be removing those punishments, which is going to eventually lead to more and more prowess and bigger special attack damage. Once you empty his health bar for a second time, Phase 2 will end. Last but not least is Phase 3, and here's where the fight completely turns you on your head. In this phase, GLYKHAN will start with all of his punishments already at max stacks, and you will be removing one each time you perform one of the necessary actions instead of adding one. And again, you'll be granted prowess whenever you do this. Fully dexing a special in this phase will also remove a random punishment. Having all punishments at max stacks means that you start this phase with all of the associated side effects active. So to kind of work around this, what you want to do in this phase is trigger the punishments in the reverse order. So start with using a special attack and then work backwards from there. Now the main issue here is that your parries and your striker stuns won't work because you're starting the fight with the maximum stacks of the punishment of frustration. So you kind of have two options on how to play it from here. Your first option is to actually start intercepting in order to remove the punishments of frustration, which will then allow you to reliably trigger your parries and your striker stuns in order to remove those other punishments. Your second option is to continue to forego intercepting and build your prowess by only working within the confines of using your special attacks and hitting into his block. This is going to be much slower and much more methodical, but it may end up being easier for you. If you remove 12 total punishments, again, you'll be gaining that bonus prowess and the stacks will be all reset to max. If you are taking the intercept route, I'd recommend you try not to do this so that you don't reset the frustration punishments to max and lose that ability accuracy on your stuns again. Now, the biggest challenge in this phase, as you might have noticed already in the footage, is that whenever GLYKHAN uses a heavy or a special attack within striking distance, you're going to be passively rooted until either the special attack ends or you punish him. And you still need to get those full dexes in order to avoid the wounds of Defiance. Stick to baiting the special one only in this phase because it is much easier to do. The phases don't stack, so you don't have to worry about his power gain anymore or him randomly choosing which special attack he's going to use. I'd highly recommend that you invest in the standard ground mastery here, as that is probably going to save you a few times when he launches a random heavy attack and you are unprepared to dex out of the way. This phase with nailing the special attacks while rooted is very difficult, but once you get that special one dex down and you start hitting it every single time, you're going to feel like you're on top of the world. Trust me on that one. So there technically isn't a final phase in this fight, but when you would finish Phase 3, GLYKHAN has a 99.96% chance to gain an indestructible passive for 16 seconds. Any hit that you take from him while this indestructible is active will immediately KO you. So from here, it's just a matter of surviving long enough until the indestructible expires, and then you can land the actual killing blow. Since it's technically still Phase 3, you'll still be rooted during his heavies and specials, so try to avoid hitting into him as much as you can. You really don't want to be giving him a lot of power. Once the indestructible wears off, you'll have to punish a heavy or a special attack in order to deal that final hit, and after that, give yourself a hearty round of applause on a job well done. Okay, the last thing I want to cover in the guide is the timing on both of his special attacks. So I'll walk you through both of them at slow speed and tell you where you need to be performing the dexes. Then I'll do slow speed with audio cues, and then finally full speed with the audio cues. So let's go ahead and start with the special one. The special one has 5 total dexes that you need to land, and the first one is this little roundhouse kick here. Then he's going to jump up and throw his axe, that's 2. Then he teleports down and slashes you, that's 3 and 4. And finally, number 5 is that little kick jump there. Here it is in slow motion with some audio cues. And one more time at real speed. The Special 2 is a little trickier, although it only has 4 dexes. So the first one is going to be this giant axe slash here. Then he's going to again teleport and slam down. The third dex is an uppercut. And then the fourth one is when he throws the axe. So let's take a look at that in slow motion with the audio cues. And finally, one more time at full speed. One final thought regarding the difficulty of this fight. Since this is the final boss of an act, it should be expected that it's going to be more difficult and more punishing than the previous 3 bosses, and it is. The chip damage in particular is very rough, and the fight really does punish you for not playing well. And you're going to find that some of your runs are going to be over pretty quickly if you stack a few of those wounds of defiance on you. You should probably expect that it's going to cost you some revives. That's perfectly fine. Having said that, though, I think that you might find it beneficial to heal up to full in between fights. Because those wounds of defiance deal a flat percentage of your health in damage, healing to full is going to give you much more slack when it comes to making mistakes, so just something you should keep in mind. That's going to do it for another boss guide, folks. I hope it was helpful for you. If you have any questions on the fight, I will be happy to answer them in the comments below. If you found this guide useful, please let me know with a comment. I love hearing from people that I've helped. You can do me a huge favor in return by pressing that like button and then sharing the video with your friends and your alliance mates. Finally, I would ask that you please consider subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. You can always change your mind later, but I think I've got some great stuff here, and there's always more content on the way. Good luck with GLYKHAN, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.